The world is veiled in darkness, the wind stops, the sea is wild, and the earth begins to rot. The people wait, their only hope, a prophecy. When the world is in darkness, 4 warriors will come. After a long journey, 4 young warriors arrive, each holding an orb. The year is 1987. The Simpsons first appeared on the Tracy Ullman Show. Lethal Weapon goes into theaters and my parents wouldn't let me watch it. Aretha Franklin is the first woman to get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it's a very much deserved award, by the way. And in America, we are still playing games like this. Little did us foolish Americans know, but a game was also released this year in Japan that would shake the very foundations of the world, leaving a path of awesome in its wake. I'm talking about Final Fantasy here, guys. What, were you expecting a Zelda game or something? No. Zelda Retrospective suck. What kind of idiotic, retarded, autistic, stupid, ignorant moron would do something like that? As I have already stated, Final Fantasy was released in Japan in the year 1987, but I really need to start before that in the year 1983, the year of my birth, by the way, and talk about a man by the name of Masafune Miyamoto. Miyamoto-san founded Square in 1983, with their first 2 games being The Death Trap and The Death Trap 2, both created by Hironobu Sakaguchi. You will hear this name again, by the way. Square then started making games for the Famicom disk system in 1986, until they almost went bankrupt because the disk system never caught on in Japan, and the games for it were not selling. Things looked dark in the Square world, until Sakaguchi-san became inspired to make a game due to the success of then Enix's Dragon Warrior series, and started production of Final Fantasy in 1987, and it was released later that same year. With the success of Dragon Warrior in Japan and in America, it was decided to translate Final Fantasy into English, and it was released in the States in 1990, to be met with a very lukewarm reception, mainly because Nintendo America used to not know how to market shit to save their lives. While on a side note, there was no European release of Final Fantasy I until 2003, poor schmucks. But now that I have all the dull and dry history out of the way, let's take an actual look at the game itself. The storyline was very simple. 4 Warriors of Light ventured to Corneria, which spun off into a rather funny joke in 8-bit theater. Welcome to Corneria. I like swords! Welcome to Corneria. I like swords! Where they received the mission to go find a princess who was kidnapped by the Dark Knight Garland. After they defeat Garland and return the princess, they receive a bridge in their honor. Apparently the creators of Final Fantasy weren't very creative, or maybe they were just too creative for their own good. From this point, Final Fantasy turned into a where the hell do I go kind of game. There really wasn't much in the way of telling you where to go next. This could have been a way of trying to artificially lengthen the game for the player, but I honestly think that it was more of a design flaw and a company getting used to making this style of game. Though the storyline does finally come full circle, showing that the warriors are actually stuck in a sort of time loop, if you will, due to the final antagonist creating a system where they will never die but always be revived, causing the process to start again each time the Warriors of Light were victorious. The storyline concluding to show it was a never-ending string of events ties back to the creation of the game itself. Now just stay with me for a second, if you will. You see, Final Fantasy was going to be the last game ever released by Square, and by making a game that literally would never end, they were creating a game that contrasted to their current status. They might end, but their game, their Final Fantasy, never would. You see what I'm getting at here? Now, as for the graphics, I must say, for the 8-bit Nintendo, they were great. We were used to seeing screens like in Dragon Warrior, so to see a screen like this was amazing. To see our characters on the field and to see different animations for each spell was remarkable. It was certainly a game that impressed those who played it visually, and it also impressed players with its soundtrack and score. After all, it did create a song that is synonymous with gaming in general. This song, the Crystal theme, would go down in history as one of the most iconic video game themes ever. Though this could be tied back to the composer, Nobuo Uematsu, who would later go on to compose most of the songs from the remaining Final Fantasies to be created. Now, as for the system used, the game was very similar to that of Dungeons & Dragons, which you could say that for pretty much every RPG that has ever been created, because they all tie back to D&D in some way or another. Instead of the game giving you characters to use, you were required to create your own team of 4 characters by choosing a class from a list containing a fighter, white mage, black mage, red mage, monk, and thief. Another similarity to D&D was that instead of the MP system for magic, which Final Fantasy fans are used to now, you were only able to cast a certain number of spells each day before sleeping again, much like the wizards within Dungeons & Dragons. There are other similarities, but to point them all out right now would take me way too freaking long. The last thing I wish to cover is a few items and themes that are carried into the later installments of the series. The first one would be the appearance of Bahamut. Yes, he makes his first appearance in the series right here, but instead of being a summon, he would actually upgrade your character classes. Say the fighter becomes a knight and the dark mage becomes a dark wizard. If you bring him a rat's tail, that is, you will once again see the connection of Bahamut and the rat's tail in Final Fantasy IV. There is also the design of the black mage himself. This design, as cool as it is, died off until Final Fantasy IX, where the creators used this design yet again for the character Vivi. Airships were also introduced into the very first Final Fantasy, and have continued throughout the history of the series, to a point where they have even become plot devices on occasion. Well, that covers my look back at the very first Final Fantasy to be released. My suggestion is if you have not played this game and you are a fan of the Final Fantasy series, you really need to. You can find many versions to play, from the NES to the PlayStation, Game Boy Advance, and the PSP. Though, I would suggest that first-time adventurers become very friendly with GameFAQs.com, because you will be referencing it a lot. Now, join me next time where we will once again look into the year 1990, but this time to a certain Final Fantasy series on the Game Boy that inspired one of the most famous and successful monster-catching games to ever be released. Yep, that's the one. This is the Professor. Adieu. Once again, this could be laid back to the composer Nobuo Uematsu. Fucking you shit. Fuck! Shit!